It was in this position I learned that the phenomena is indeed real.
I will never forget those words that I heard live streamed 4 years ago. When I heard Elizondo say that it was in this position that I learned the phenomenon is indeed real, I knew there and then that the world would never go back to the way that it was. I had this intrinsic perspective right when that happened. And 4 years later, that feeling that I had within me seems to have been quite accurate as things have played out. I mean, after all, Elizondo wasn't there alone. He was with Chris Mellon, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence at one time. My understanding, number three in intelligence within the Department of Defense. He was with Steve Justice, who, as I understand, was number 2 in the premier aerospace company in the world, Lockheed Martin. He was the number 2 guy for the Skunk Works. And then we have Jim Semivan, who had an illustrious 25-year career in the Central Intelligence Agency. And at the time of his retirement, he was in the CIA's Senior Intelligence Service. And of course, we had Hal Puthoff on the stage as well, who has carried a security clearance forever, is a high-level scientist and has made many amazing contributions to the U.S. government in many different capacities. And so I got on this game, if you will, covering it, reading about it, staying on top of it, making videos, because I saw the significance of it. I saw that the world was changing and I wanted to be a part of that conversation. And frankly, that's what drives me to this day. I want to be a part of the conversation. And YouTube and Twitter and social media allows me to fulfill that on a very high level, and I'm grateful for that. It's a privilege. And yet, when that happened, and shortly after and up until this day, we had people telling us all kinds of stuff. They told us that this is just a money grab. That's all that is. These people are just going to join the UFO circuit and make their pockets filled with Benjamin Franklins, which of course makes no sense. These are high-level ex-government officials. They could do consulting work. They could do all kinds of things and make a boatload of money. They could have stayed in their careers and made a boatload of money. You don't leave those positions to make money through UFOs. That's not a thing. And I knew that was a ridiculous sentiment back then, and yet those kind of ridiculous sentiments carry on to this very day. We were told that pilots, when we got the UFO gun camera footage in the New York Times, and I think the Washington Post, we were told that because there was audio in some of those footages, except for the FLIR 1, we were told that pilots don't talk like that, right? Oh, these are hoaxes. These are not realistic videos. These have been doctored. They're not real because pilots don't talk like that. That ended up being completely wrong. We were told that AATIP didn't study UFOs when it was obvious from the get-go that they did. We were told that Luis Elizondo really was not the director of AATIP when the corroborating evidence that he was overwhelming. People that worked for AATIP, the guy who started it, Harry Reid, vouched for Elizondo. And yet to this very day, there are people that still doubt that Elizondo was the director of AATIP. Trust me when I tell you there were other claims and comments made about this process that has been happening for the last 4 years that I don't need to include. I hope you just get the gist that a lot of people came up with a lot of assessments that were, from my perspective, ridiculous and did not pan out. And I think the lesson behind this, frankly, is that naivety does not just go in one direction. And I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem that people think that if you don't believe in XYZ conspiracy theory or alternative explanation, therefore you must be naive. Well, I beg to differ. That can be true, but it's not always true. A lot of times, the more plain and less conspiratorial explanation is the least naive one. But it seems people often get incentivized, for whatever reason, to look for another explanation instead of the one that's plain and corroborated and most likely. But I digress. Now, to add to some of the very ridiculous comments that have been made over the years, what's caught my eye very recently are respected skeptics basically indulging conspiracy theories to explain away the sea change that is occurring within the American government and how it pertains to UAP. Here's a great tweet by my good friend Finn, and it's a typo. It's really February 2020, but let's dive in. February 2020, Lieutenant Tim McMillan published his excellent article inside the Pentagon's secret UFO program, McWest. But does it amount to more than Harry Reid following his personal interests in funneling some money to the usual suspects? Here's the rest of Finn's tweet, which incorporates a sentiment made by McWest. Great stuff, and as Finn pointed out, when he said that, he's referencing the Popular Mechanics article that published in February of 2020 titled Inside the Pentagon's Secret UFO Program, but largely arcana to the general public. I think the unfortunate thing is that the secrecy apparatus in the military-industrial complex prevents anything really interesting or even boring yet relevant from being made public. This also allows people to read what they prefer into limited information. So we've got some fascinating stuff on government-funded studies and some hints about classified hearings about something, probably airspace incursions. But does it amount to more than Harry Reid following his personal interests in funneling some money to the usual suspects? I think the several references to the paranormal are rather telling regarding the degree of extreme open-mindedness here. This is going to be framed in the popular press as U.S. government studies UFOs, but really, it's mostly Bigelow tries to find evidence of UFO technology and does some technology speculation and got some funding from the government because he knows Harry Reid. Also, the government is concerned about airspace incursions. That said, where's the 10-month report? That looks interesting. And the 10-month report is spoken about within that article. Tim McMillan, the author of the aforementioned Popular Mechanics article, replies to Finn and says, I don't even know what to say to Mick West other than if he really thinks Harry Reid and Bigelow single-handedly control U.S. politicians and the intelligence and defense communities, that sounds a lot like some crazy QA conspiracy theory to me. Right now, we are positioned for a new and ongoing effort to study UFOs within the Department of Defense. Congress getting regular reports on UFO history going back to the 40s and current events. Congress getting information on health-related effects with those that have encountered UFOs, which is a big part of UFO history and lore. We've heard many stories of radiation and sunburns from encountering these alleged craft. Congress getting an update on any effort underway on the ability to capture or exploit discovered unidentified aerial phenomena, which, of course, in my opinion, harkens to crash retrievals and Roswell. There has also been mention of further coordination with U.S. allies and industry partners, suggesting the Armed Services Committee views UAP as something with far more international implications and not isolated to just the United States. And this is all based on legislation that is playing out right now. We've certainly come a long way from 4 years ago, and many of the claims that skeptics and cynics have made have failed miserably. And, in my estimation, many new claims that they make will also fail miserably on account of the fact that ISS UFOs are completely real, they are truly unknown, and that their technology surpasses any known technology. So, if we are to look at this issue through the lens of them being real, everything taking place right now makes perfect sense. Because ultimately, such an acknowledgement and changes in policy on how, for example, the US government handles this issue would ultimately change. On the other hand, if you are looked through the lens of this is all just people being fantasists and misidentifications, there's no forensic data that has been collected to prove the existence of these machines by the United States government, then you have a little bit more of a challenging time ahead of you to make sense of what's happening. And this saga is continuing to unfold. And I'm going to continue calling it like I see it. I've done so since day one, and I shall continue to do so. On September 13th, 2021, The Hollywood Reporter reported that former Pentagon UFO official Luis Elizondo to reveal shocking details in new book. The former head of the U.S. government's secretive UFO program will pen a book for HarperCollins that includes profound implications for humanity. The memoir promises to reveal shocking, never-before-shared details regarding what Elizondo has learned about UFOs and the profound implications for humanity, all of which will escalate what is already a hot topic globally. Said Elizondo in a statement, "The American people now know a small portion of what I and my colleagues in the Pentagon have been privy to, that these UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, are not secret U.S. technology, that they do not seem to belong to any known allies or adversaries, and that our intelligence services have yet to identify a terrestrial explanation for these extraordinary vehicles. This conversation is only just beginning." I don't know when this book will be published. I don't even know if Elizondo has begun writing it. But what I can tell you is that on Twitter, I have seen some pushback against him writing this memoir. It doesn't really make sense to me. But then again, there have been so many things said, so many claims made, so many sentiments expressed over the past 4 years that a lot of things have not made sense to me whatsoever. So nothing new there. Now, I'm going to give you a little analysis on this development. I think that Elizondo is a very intelligent person. He has a scientific background. I know he got a master's in immunology and maybe something else, but within that arena. He's been an intelligence officer his entire career. I don't think he's prone to fantasy. I think he's just a normal human being. And I don't think him as an individual is much different than many others that have come forward about UFOs over the past 70 plus years. Over and over again, people of high credibility and who have sanity, and there's no reason to believe there's something wrong with them, have been telling us that this is real. The U.S. government has forensic proof that this is real and so forth. This is nothing new. This is the latest iteration of it. I mean, this is a huge escalation within that arena, but still, this is a basic pattern, just like the patterns I've spoken about in the past that UFOs fulfill, which I won't get into in this video. I've said it many times. But my quick analysis is that Elizondo is a very calculated person, which isn't a surprise. He worked in counterintelligence his entire career. And so, just like any normal human being, he doesn't want to look like a fool or an idiot. He doesn't want his grandkids or his children to see him in that light. And he never really wanted the limelight to begin with. He's said that many times. He left the DOD to change the conversation on this subject and inform the American public as well as the world at large what's going on. And he's also said many times he left the DOD out of loyalty, not out of disloyalty, because he saw that this issue was not being handled correctly and he wants the right thing to be done for the Department of Defense, for the American public, and for the world at large. And so, just like Elizondo, just like Steve Justice, just like Chris Mellon, just like Jim Semivan, these people are normal people. They're intelligent. They didn't come forward on this issue to gamble away their reputation when they have illustrious careers. And with Chris Mellon, he has a very famous family, for example. They did it, in my opinion, because this is a real phenomenon. And it's not a speculative phenomenon. And I've said it many times, and I will never stop saying it until I'm proven wrong, that the U.S. government has forensic proof that we are simply not alone. The evidence does not point to an adversary. The evidence points to an unknown intelligence. So Elizondo finally feeling comfortable to write this memoir speaks to where we are right now. If he thought for a moment that this was all going to just blow up, right? And the prognostications of people like Mick West and other respected skeptics that this is just a flap and this is all predicated on influential people influencing the very structure of our government to change their tune on UFOs. If he gave credence to that, he wouldn't write this book, because I don't think he wants his grandchildren one day to look at him and be like, "Grandpa, you're a crazy guy." I remember when this UFO flap was happening and you were telling the American public and the world all these things and none of it came to pass. We're just where we were before. We won't be just where we were before. This was an inevitability. And many are amazed that they were able to embargo this reality for so long. But all secrets have a shelf life, and this one is, frankly, coming to an end. And I've been doing this for 4 years, at least, and I've called it like I saw it. And let me go on a limb. Just like Elizondo, just like Chris Mellon, just like Semivan, just like Hal Puthoff and others. Do you think I want this 4 years of videos to blow up in my face? Do you think that I want to look like some fool who was just gullible and misinterpreted the literature going back 70 plus years, when in reality it was just seagulls and it was Venus and flares. And by the way, a lot of times it is seagulls, flares, and Venus. But that's an oversimplistic evaluation. Most sightings are prosaic. There's a small percentage that are not. And some of those are highly corroborated. And because patterns have emerged over the decades, it is absolutely rational to come away with the assessment that there's a there. And we are dealing with an enigma of the highest order. So just like Elizondo and them, I don't want to come off looking like a fool. Now, they have a lot more to lose than I do. Make no mistakes. I'm just some crazy guy on YouTube. If I get proven wrong, I'll be like, whatever, I was wrong. Go have at it. Use me as an example of how not to approach a mystery. But I'll tell you this. I think that the historians looking back at this issue decades from now are not going to say, oh, there was no evidence there. All these UFO quote unquote believers were just lucky. A broken clock's right twice daily. And they were just lucky. No, they're going to say, you know what? They saw through the BS and the propaganda that was done by the U.S. government over many years, and the stigma that saturated our civilization. They're going to say, no, these people, while not perfect, were actually quite rational to not be so convinced as our institutions were and continue to be, by the way, that there's no there. So we're all sticking our neck out in some way, shape, or form. And there's some beauty to that, perhaps. And I was talking to my friend Finn recently, and I said to him, we're very lucky in some sense. We've been following the story, and we ascertained the significance of UAP. We perceive it as, at the very minimum, one of the greatest stories in human history. And I said to him, in the Western world, maybe only 4% of the Western world has this understanding of what's at stake here and the significance of UAP. And he said, yeah, maybe even less. So if you're watching this and if you've been following this story since October 11th, 2017 and before, if you've been interested in UAP, if you have seen the evidence and come away with the assessment that the institutions of our world have got it completely wrong. Now, I'm not a black or white person. I've always felt that there was a spectrum of reasonable interpretation. So I don't feel like you have to be 99% certain UAP are of non-human origin to be reasonable. You could be like 5% chance, 10% chance. My point that I've repeated often in the past is that the position many institutions and skeptics take that it's astronomical that some UAP represent non-human technology is not appropriate when we do an objective look at the evidence over 70 plus years. And I think that perspective is going to be vindicated, and that our scholars and our historians are going to say, yeah, that was probably the most objective and rational perspective. Things are heating up. You better believe I'm working on a disclosure update right now, and I kind of take that disclosure update personally. I take it personally. You know what I'm saying? I take it personally because I'm looking at this and I'm like, how can I not take this personally? The government could have thrown cold water on UAP long ago, since December 16th, 2017. They could have put the kibosh on it so easily, child, and they did not. And they did not. So for me, part of my perspective is like, I'm trying to sound the alarms, son. I am literally trying to sound the alarms and trying to wake people up. I'm not telling you what to believe. Be skeptical. Be skeptical of everything. Giving you my argument and allowing you to ascertain it on your own with yourself. Because I probably say more than anybody in the UFO community, I could be wrong. I say that all the time, son, all the time. But at the end of the day, I have to call it like I see it. And I have to hold my ground with my intellectual analysis, period. And so I'm taking the next disclosure update personally, because the way things are turning out, they are not turning out in a way that you would expect them to turn out if UFOs were just all prosaic and drones or seagulls or this or that. I expect this to escalate further because there is a there, and all secrets have a shelf life, and this one's starting to smell rotten, son. You see this at the grocery store, you don't buy it. You don't buy it. I think that's all I have to say. If you'd enjoy this video, please do not forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can check out my merch shop, you can check out my Patreon or YouTube membership, or you can even just give me a one-time donation, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy and I will appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those who have bought merch, those who have given me one-time donations. All of you have really helped me out and I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.